Okay, welcome to completing the square. Now in our very last video we talked about perfect squares, and here we're going to talk about an imperfect square and how can we take an imperfect square and make it a perfect square. Well, I want y'all to notice something. Here's where our problem lies. First things first, we're going to talk about some things. First things first, this is what we call standard form. Okay, standard form. Why is this in standard form? Well, we have f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, and you'll notice we actually have a problem here. -1 is not a perfect square. So check it out. Thousands of years ago, math people, math majors, whatever you'd call them back then, they said, you know what? We're just going to make our own perfect square. And that's what we're going to do right now. How do we do that? Well, if we want to factor this, or more or less transform this into something else, we're going to do this. We're going to say, you know what, f of x is equal to, and we're going to write the first part of this. We're going to write the x squared plus 8x. And we're going to put this in parentheses, and we're going to leave ourselves just a nice big space. Okay. And we're going to leave that -1 on the outside. Now, what is the trick for creating your own perfect square? Okay. What is the trick for creating your own perfect square? It's the formula b over 2 squared. And guys, y'all have got to remember this. It is one of the most important tricks that we're going to learn this year. So b over 2 squared. Well, we know that our b term is this 8 because it's in front of the x. And so we're going to say, you know what is 8 over 2 squared? Well, of course, we take care of our parentheses first, and 8 divided by 2 is 4 squared. And y'all should know 4 squared. 4 times 4 will give us 16. This is our perfect square that we want. So we'll write plus 16. Now, here's going to be the weirdest things that you've experienced so far. We're not adding 16 to both sides. So if we're not adding 16 to both sides, and we need to keep the equation balanced, if we add positive 16 on the right side, we're also going to add negative 16 on the right side. We're going to add the positive 16 and its opposite to keep the equation balanced. So this then becomes f of x is equal to, and now we're actually going to factor that. Well, remember, we'll have x times x, and we'll leave spaces for our constants here. And the question becomes, what two numbers add up to be 8 and multiply to be 16? And of course, the answer there is plus 4 and plus 4. And if you want a smooth little trick, it's always going to be your b term divided by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Perfect. And guys, -1 minus 16 is -17. Now there's one final little thing here. We're going to write this as f of x equals x plus 4 squared minus 17. And this is, in fact, this is an entirely new thing. We have just changed this from standard form to vertex form. And vertex form, guys, is in the form of f of x is equal to a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. Okay, now this you don't have to worry about for right now, but we'll come back to that later. Okay, let's go ahead and see another example, and let's move a little bit faster. Okay, let's take a look at example 2, and let's say we want to change example 2 from our standard form. So I'll just go ahead and write that. It's in standard. So we're going to change that from standard to vertex form, and we have to do that because that is not a perfect square. Okay, what are we going to do? Well, guys, remember, we're going to do this. We're going to say, you know what? h of x is equal to, and we're going to go ahead and write parentheses x squared plus 10x. We always keep our first two terms. We're going to leave a space and to put that -3. Now, if you will recall, what's our trick? Well, our trick is b over 2 squared, and what is our b term? Our b term is always this coefficient in front of the x. Okay. So we're going to have 10 over 2 squared, and 10 divided by 2, of course, we know that that is 5 squared, and 5 squared is equal to 25. So we're going to write plus 25 right there. And once again, ask yourself, if we're only writing things on the right-hand side, how do we keep that balanced? Well, we'll write minus 25. Okay, from here, guys, I'm only going to do this one more time, the full breakdown. We know that we have now created a perfect square, so we can break it down into x something times x something. And guys, what two numbers add up to be 10 and multiply to be 25? Or aka, what's half of 10? That's our trick. It's going to be 5. Now, of course, minus 3 and minus 25 will become minus 28. And we're one step away. I ask you, how many times do you see x plus 5? And hopefully, you would say twice. So we wind up writing it as x plus 5 squared minus 28. And this is, in fact, our vertex form. And why do we call it vertex form? I'm going to take this one step further. It's because this x value is always the opposite of the constant, like in our previous video. So that's going to be negative 5, comma, this just stays as is, negative 28. What are we really saying? We're saying if we were to go 5 to the left and down 28, this quadratic would look something like that. Alright, let's go on to our final example, and we're going to do this faster than any of the rest. Alright, y'all, we're going to complete the square speed run style. Let's check it out. That is not a perfect square, so I simply write f of x equals x squared minus 12x. I'll leave a space, and I write my plus 6. We know that our trick is b over 2 squared, where our b term is that negative 12, so I write negative 12 over 2 squared. Ask yourself, what is negative 12 divided by 2? That's negative 6 squared. And y'all should know this, anytime you square a number, it will always be positive, so negative 6 squared is 36. So I write my perfect square plus 36. Now remember, to keep this balance, I will also write minus 36. And so, I'm also going to cheat here. I'm going to skip a step. Check this out. To transform this perfect square into a literal perfect square, we're going to simply take half of our b term. What is half of negative 12? Well, it's minus 6 squared. And plus 6 minus 36 will give us minus 30. And we have just, in under 2 minutes, transformed this imperfect square into a perfect square into vertex form. And if I were to ask you, where's the vertex of this quadratic, you'd say, you know what, mister? I take this x as the opposite of negative 6, positive 6, and that minus 30, I write it as is. And if I go to the right 6 and down 30, I would have a quadratic that would look something like that. Alright, I'll see you guys in our next video.